Welcome to the Dr. Rima Truth Reports. My name is Rima Ilebo, MD, and I am the Medical Director of the Natural Solutions Foundation. With me, as always, my co-host and co-trustee of the Natural Solutions Foundation, Council Ralph. And I am very, very pleased to tell you that we have another lawyer with us too. Now, usually pods of lawyers are something to worry about. But when you have lawyers who are freedom fighters, who are health freedom fighters, and they bring their wisdom and their skill and their understanding of the law and the subtlety of the law together, and they're on your side, then you have something to celebrate. And that's what we have tonight. With us, we have Counsel Kent Heckenlively from California, who loves to declare himself the world's #1 anti-vaxxer. I have to tell you that Counsel Heckenlively makes me very jealous because I want to be the world's #1 anti-vaxxer, and you want to be the world's #1 anti-vaxxer. All of us need to declare proudly and assertively, I am an anti-vaxxer because I value life, science, truth, and freedom. Counsel Ralph, are you the world's #1 anti-vaxxer too?
Well, like the freedom fighters who stood with Spartacus in ancient Rome, I guess I should say I am Kent Heckenlively.
Indeed, and I am Kent Heckenlively too. And you know, there's another parallel to this. When the Germans invaded Denmark and the Jews were ordered to wear yellow stars on their sleeves so they could be identified and subsequently rounded up and exterminated, the King of Denmark and his entire family showed up the next morning with a yellow star on their sleeves, and so did virtually everybody else in Denmark almost immediately. I don't know where they got all the yellow stars. But the point is, they all said, we are together, the Jews, just as they were together, Spartacus. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are together, the world's #1 anti-vaxxers, because we value truth, we value science, we value our loved ones, and we value our freedom. Kent Heckenlively, welcome to the Dr. Rima Truth Reports. And let me say before we begin getting into the absolute meat of what we're talking about, which is an end to the slaughter of the innocents through the syringe of death. Before we get into the meat of that, let me say that this is a retake. This is a second attempt at having this show, because the first attempt had all kinds of anomalous, crazy interference through our recording system, and that's not uncommon. When we hit new ground, when we're breaking that new ground, all kinds of electronic weirdness happens. So this time, we're pre-recording the show, and you, Counsel Heckenlively, will indeed be aired on the Dr. Rima Truth Reports. So thank you for being with us again. And now tell us why we need a 5-year moratorium on childhood vaccines.
Well, first of all, Dr. Rima, thanks for having me on the program. And I have a suggestion. I think the Natural Solutions Foundation should sell buttons and bumper stickers that says, I am the world's #1 anti-vaxxer. I am happy to give that to the Natural Solutions Foundation. Take it and run with it and raise as much money for all the wonderful work that you do.
Thank you. I love that idea. Ralph, we're going to go into the bumper sticker and button area of the world.
This is the 21st century. Do people still use bumper stickers?
You put them on your car, put them on somebody else's car.
Right.
See,
I think somebody else's car.
What I think they really need to do is I think people need to buy like a couple hundred of these bumper stickers. Then in the dead of night, go to their local hospital, go to the doctors and nurses parking lot, and put them on all of the doctors and nurses' vehicles. So I think we.
I love it. You know, you are my kind of guy.
Why do we need a 5-year childhood vaccine moratorium? Okay, so I've been at this struggle for about 15 years, and I think I started like everybody else did, which is often with a vaccine injured child, and it happens in such a way that it's so clear to you that there can be no other answer, and then you start doing your research and you really fall down this rabbit hole saying, I can't believe all of this is going on. And you start with this perspective of, I just don't think the other side understands what we're saying. So let me approach them in a nice, reasonable, rational, non threatening way. And, a couple years go by and you just realize you're making absolutely no progress. So, I went through that stage. I went through the stage of writing books. I've written the book Plague with Dr. Judy Mikovits, who's a 20-year government scientist about corruption in medicine, specifically with retroviruses and vaccines. Then I wrote Inoculated, how science lost its soul in autism, which is all about the CDC whistleblower, Dr. William Thompson, and really kind of the legal structure that has existed for the past 30 years, which has allowed this tragedy to take place. And you get to that point where you say, I've done everything peacefully and tried to be reasonable. It's not just that the other side isn't listening to me, it's that the other side is actively trying to destroy our movement. And there's a certain political approach you take when you have a partner on the other side, and there's another approach you take when you don't have a partner on the other side and you have an enemy on the other side. I liken it to Winston Churchill during the Second World War. He didn't look up and see Nazi planes over London and said, oh gosh, if I can just get those planes to stop bombing England, everything will be good. No, he knew that he had to go to Berlin and he had to kill Hitler. That was it, because Hitler wasn't going to stop. And I feel that the same kind of approach has been taken by a lot of people in the autism movement. Is the other side will come and say, oh, we're going to have mandates, so your kids have to get vaccines in order to go to school. And we respond with, no mandates. Well, I don't think you win on defense. I think you win on offense. So I thought to myself, what are the couple things that if we could accomplish would absolutely devastate pharma? And I thought, okay, first of all, I think their vaccines are unsafe. And, the Supreme Court agrees with me, because the Supreme Court has said in several opinions that vaccines are unavoidably unsafe. So let's just take vaccines off the table for 5 years. Okay, then we've got this terrible 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, which took childhood vaccines, out of the regular civil court system and put them in this kangaroo court that hardly anybody knows about, called vaccine court. And any lawyer worth their salt looks at this thing and would say, my God, this isn't a real court. I can't call witnesses from the other side. I can't get documents. The pharmaceutical companies have no responsibility whatsoever. So, number two, get rid of that terrible vaccine court and do something simple. Throw vaccines into the regular civil court system that every other consumer product you use is under. Then make sure you do vaccinated, unvaccinated studies long term. And then finally, and this is something that I think will be a shock to a lot of your listeners, and Robert Kennedy has done a great job in detailing this, because he's got connections in the networks. I mean, for God's sakes, he's a Kennedy. Of course, everybody at the networks knows him, will take his phone call. And what Kennedy says is that 60 to 70% of the nightly news is supported by the pharmaceutical industry. Now, if you doubt that, I encourage your listeners to go watch any news broadcast for an hour and write down the number of commercials there are and write down the number that are pharma ads. I think you probably find 60 to 70% sounds about right. So, and this will probably come as a shock to a lot of people, is that every other country in the world only allows pharmaceutical advertising to medical professionals. They don't allow it to the public. So I think the United States needs to follow the lead of the world. I think we need to just put vaccines back into the regular civil court system. And, 5 year period while we're looking at these things, I really think that even though I call it a moratorium, I think that when people see what happens, I think this is dramatically going to change what we think about vaccines. And I really don't think vaccines will ever rise again. I think it's going to be like antibiotics. Oh, yeah, it seemed like a good idea, but after time when we looked at it, not such a good idea, maybe only reserved for those emergency situations.
There's another reason that I think we need to do this. I think we need a 5-year moratorium on childhood vaccines because, as I understand it, and remember, I am not an attorney, I am a physician, so I may be incorrect here, but please, gentlemen attorneys, please correct me if I am wrong. But according to my understanding, in the 1986 legislation, which created the Vaccine Injury Compensation Court, which of course is a kangaroo court, not a real court at all. In that same act, it said that every vaccine had to be shown through scientific means to be both safe and effective, and that every vaccine had to be safer than previous vaccines. The number of vaccines which has ever been shown to be either safe or effective, let alone both as required by law, is zero, which to my non-lawyerly mind suggests that every vaccine, whether for horse, for hound, for child, or for grandparent, or anybody else in between, is illegal in the United States. It is imperative, it seems to me, to declare a 5-year moratorium and then in that time compel the government to conduct open scientific trials that, when I say open, I mean scientific trials that we can observe closely and monitor the chicanery out of, because without that, nobody can ever raise their voice and say, but vaccines are safe, and with it, they can only lie.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right about that. And what's really been great about this effort is, I started with the idea of a 5 year moratorium with those 4 points I suggested, and then Ralph came to me afterwards and he said, "Gee, that's a great approach, and I've got some strong legal backing with some of the things that I've worked on, some great legal arguments." And so he came up with a wonderful idea about, even in the legislation, it says that vaccines have to be shown to be safe and effective. And then he came up with this other wonderful argument, which is the argument of informed consent. Well, predicate to giving informed consent is having adequate information in order to make that decision. What Ralph pointed out, and when he said it, I immediately said, "Oh, that's a great way of looking at it," is he said, "Look, since they haven't done the research that they're supposed to do, you actually can't even give informed consent because you don't know what the risks are. Nobody does." And so we need something that is strong enough to get people's attention and will really make a difference. And that's why I think that this 5 year childhood vaccine moratorium is such a winner and is hitting people so well. I mean, response to this has just been tremendous.
And while we're giving praise to each other, which is a wonderful thing to do, let me add Dr. Rima in on that, because it was she who pointed out to both of us the slogan, if you will, whitehouse.gov petition plus FDA regulations.gov petition equals political pressure plus legal standing. And that's a really brilliant analysis of what we're really doing here. We're giving President Trump cover, if you will, for him to do what he said he would do during his campaign. Right now, there are a lot of people saying that President Trump is not really living up to his campaign promises. Well, in the area of vaccine regulation, he has an opportunity to live up to his promises. We've given him the political cover through the whitehouse.gov petition, and we're giving him the legal cover through the FDA regulations.gov petition. And why? Because most of our federal regulations begin as a citizen's petition through regulations.gov. There are thousands of such petitions filed every year, and the agencies can cherry pick from among the petitions filed with that particular agency to find what they want to move their agenda forward. Well, we're giving the Trump administration an opportunity to move its agenda forward. Most federal regulations, most people don't understand, begin with a citizen's petition filed at regulations.gov. The various agencies pick and choose from among the thousands of petitions that are filed each year, and they choose the ones that will bring their agenda forward. Well, we have an opportunity now to help the Trump administration bring its agenda forward. We have a combination of the political pressure of a whitehouse.gov petition, and we need everyone to sign that petition. We need 100,000 signatures in 1 month. You do that by going to http://tinyurl.com/vaccine moratorium. You'll see it on the screen if you're watching this as a podcast. And that is again, tinyurl.com/vaccine moratorium. So that's the first part of it, the political pressure. The second part is the regulations.gov FDA petition, which is the legal standing. Now, in that one, we basically are giving the opportunity to the Trump administration to intervene in the FDA and tell that agency to act on this petition now. Agencies sometimes sit on petitions for years and pick and choose, as I said, which ones they want to move their agenda forward. We support the Trump administration agenda of dealing with the truth, the undeniable truth, that over the next 5 years, if nothing is done, 250,000 more American children will become autistic, and 15,000 more infants will die of sudden infant death syndrome. This is a very serious issue, and the three of us have come together tonight to talk about what we can do as a practical matter. And of course, the first step is we can get that White House petition to reach the 100,000 person mark. Very important. Secondly, we can continue to pursue this formal petition before the FDA. It essentially says to the FDA and to the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, you have failed to abide by the law, as Dr. Rima explained earlier, the law that says new vaccines have to be safer than old. You failed to prove that these vaccines are safer. The statistics are clear. Unvaccinated children are healthier than vaccinated children. We begin our formal petition with that fact. And we show from a very recent study that that is indeed a fact. It cannot be ignored. Those politicians who ignore that fact are complicit in the maiming and killing of hundreds of thousands of children. And until we tell them, stop the slaughter, it will continue. Therefore, you must go to http://tinyurl.com/vaccine moratorium. We're asking for a pause. We're asking for our society to reflect. The time has come.
The time has most certainly come. I would like to perform a thought experiment with our guest, Counsel Kent Heckenlively from California, and my co-host, Counsel Ralph Fusatola from New Jersey. And the thought experiment is this: we will succeed in achieving a 5-year moratorium through public outcry and demand. And then what happens? Well, the first thing that I can think of that happens is that despite the hand-wringing and the gnashing of teeth and the predictions of people dying in the streets from measles, which of course won't happen, the rate of autism will go down. The rate of attention deficit disorder will go down. The rate of a whole slew of things like asthma and psoriasis and behavioral problems of many sorts in children will start to decline probably by about year 2. We're going to see a drop in the chronic disease medications that children are placed upon. And then what we're going to see is a level of public outrage that we haven't seen in the United States, maybe since the Vietnam War. We're going to see people so outraged by what has been perpetrated upon them and upon their innocence, their children, that the entire landscape will change. The psychological landscape will change. The level of distrust for Congress will reach unprecedented highs, I predict. There will be an attempt to clamp down on the news media, and the alternative internet sources will get bigger and bolder and brasher and better. The number of people who finally wake up to the complete distrust that they ought to have for allopathic medicine will be enormous. And the people who are practicing good medicine, so-called alternative, but that's not the right word, advanced medicine, those few physicians who are the naturopaths, the chiropractors, the herbalists, the acupuncturists, will not be the biofeedback specialists and so on, will not be able to keep up with the demand. And that will cause ineluctably a change in what we think of as allopathic medicine. The educational curriculum will have to shift because patients will stop coming to the allopathic physicians unless they become good doctors as opposed to killer doctors. I predict that this one act, a 5-year moratorium on vaccines, can change the entire landscape. It can change the economy of our culture because the vast and hideous amount of money that we spend on ineffective, dangerous, drug-based medicine will shrink, and therefore more money will be available in the economy for healthy, reasonable things. And by God, people will start being healthier and they'll start thinking better. We're going to have the peaceful revolution that we need, starting with this relatively simple act of a 5-year moratorium to end the slaughter of the innocents. What do you gentlemen think?
The time has certainly come to do something more than what we were doing. For how many centuries has it been? Since Jenner, pseudoscience of vaccination, centuries of pseudoscience. Of course, the truth of the matter is it wasn't until 1986 that this became a really deep and troubling problem, because up until that point, basically you could avoid vaccination if you wanted to. But when the 1976 first swine flu panic occurred and 400 people died from the swine flu vaccine of that era, and the drug companies told Congress, we're going to pull out of the vaccine industry. And you all know the science is settled, vaccines work, and there will be terrible things. Monsters will be unleashed upon the world if we don't have vaccines. And Congress said, oh no, we can't have that happen. And besides, you guys donate an awful lot of money to our reelection. And so they adopted a series of laws that we've been talking about in this program. One of those laws took away our right to redress, our right to sue vax pushers for the harms their vaccines do. But another one of those laws said that those vaccines have to be safe. Well, they're not. As I said, the statistics are clear. Children are not healthier as a result of vaccines. And therefore, we need to stop in 5 years of this moratorium. If national epidemic of autism stops, if there are no wild outbreaks of infectious diseases that are not manufactured by Big Pharma, then we will know that the vaccine myth is just that. And we have been sacrificing our children to Moloch all along.
So I want to talk about something with the audience, and it's going to take me a couple minutes. But
Please.
at the top of this, what I'm going to do is I want to say again, tinyurl.com/vaccine moratorium. tinyurl.com/vaccine moratorium. Here is how I know that this effort is making a difference and is terrifying those people on the other side. Mike Adams, the health ranger who runs Natural News, he put up on his website this White House petition on Saturday and started talking about it. Shortly after doing that, Mike Adams and Natural News was subjected to the largest cyber attack in their history. What they think happened, what their data shows them, is they were getting something like 225,000 requests per minute. It breached the firewall and almost took them down, but they were able to get it back. So it was so clear to Mike Adams that this is an effort that could make a difference, because you don't get attacked unless you're being effective.
It's called a DDoS, a distributed denial of service attack, and
Yep.
we've been attacked with DDoS attacks of exactly the same kind every single time we take one of these leadership steps. Yes, indeedy, this is big.
Yeah, and it was so interesting because Mike Adams actually put out an 11-minute video in which he talked about this, and he said this was the largest attack ever made against Natural News. So to everybody who's listening, they are terrified of a 5-year moratorium. That means you have power. Your comments on the White House petition and the FDA CDC petition makes a huge difference. We are right now, over 1,500 comments have been submitted to the FDA CDC petition. It takes them a while, so it may say like 800 or 900 that you see there, but then you go to the docket file and you find so many more have actually been received. So this is going to be an enormously successful effort. And so if we can get 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 people, what that means is it means that me, Ralph, and Rima are going to have an army of 500,000 of you behind us when we go to the Trump administration and we say, you have not you, but the people before you have not done their job with vaccines. You are sympathetic with us. Stop this slaughter.
Absolutely stop the slaughter. Let me remind those of you who remember General Burt, our founding president, my husband, a brilliant military strategist who brought his military strategic analytic capacity to health freedom and moved us all forward greatly. One of the things that General Burt said before he died is that informed consent is the defining issue of the 21st century. And let me point out that what killed General Burt was the denial of his informed consent, specifically by the hospital that we had to sue in order to get the right to continue giving him food and nutrients. That's how much they wanted him dead, and they finally succeeded. But the point is, he said, and we are now living out the reality of the fact that informed consent is the defining issue of the 21st century. And let me point out again that if you do not control what goes into your body or what does not go into your body, you have no hope of considering yourself a free man or woman or parent. In so many ways, at so many levels, this is the defining moment of health freedom. And we will achieve a moratorium because there is no one who does not know an autistic child, parent an autistic child, teach an autistic child, have a neighbor who's an autistic child. We are being slaughtered. Our genome is being assaulted. And we say the time has come. No more. Informed consent is indeed on the chopping block here at the vaccine needle point. tinyurl.com/vaccine moratorium. We live or we die by what we do here.
Indeed, we
That's
do.
absolutely true.
That there is a history that goes back several centuries with regard to vaccination. And there's been great dispute. When you go delving into the history, you find photographs of large demonstrations against vaccination from the latter part of the 19th century. You find even today around the world, the vaccine issue, of course, is very intense. Doctors who come out against the given wisdom of vaccination are sometimes hounded from the field. And yet we know that vaccines, according to the true arbiters of risk in our society, the insurance actuaries, they say vaccines are an uninsurable risk. And our courts say vaccines are unavoidably unsafe. And so the mythos around vaccines that they are somehow beneficial is just that. It's a myth. It's a something that's grown up because it benefits some people financially, and they don't give a darn what happens to the children. And maybe up until, as I said earlier, 1986, when the laws changed, that was not as horrible a thing as it's become recently. Although Dr. Rima tells us about instances back in the 19th century where thousands of people were killed or maimed by vaccines, and particularly dangerous vaccine drives. It's only the past several decades in which we really massively vaccinated now 2.5 generations of children. When I was a child, I received 2 or 3 vaccines. My son, who's 28, received a handful of vaccines before we stopped. Today, they want children in New Jersey, my home state, to have 78 vaccines by the time they're 18. This upward spiral in vaccination, this upward graph line going up faster and faster, is matched by another graph line going up faster and faster, and that is the amount of money being paid out on vaccine injuries by the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, the special tax-funded program. No, the drug companies don't fund it. Tax-funded program that's paid out over $3.5 billion so far. If you graph those payments from the beginning in the 80s to now, you see the same upward curve as the number of vaccines. There's a direct relationship between the number of vaccines and the amount of vaccine injuries that are compensated. It's really clear when you look at the statistics. We are ruining now so far 2, maybe 3 generations of children have been medically damaged by vaccination. Kent, I'm sorry.
One of the things I want to talk about, Ralph, is in my book, Inoculated, How Science Lost Its Own Autism, I felt that as an attorney and as somebody presenting this information to the public, it was really incumbent upon me to go to the other side and see what they had to say. So one of the people I interviewed for the book was actually was a special master at the vaccine court. And I thought, wow, this is going to be an interesting interview. And it was remarkable because I almost had the sense that I was speaking to one of the generals who fought the Vietnam War. And what he was doing was he was telling me all of the problems with vaccine court. But then when I asked him the question, well, do you think the public has been protected through this vaccine court? He said, well, I don't think that's my decision to make. And I thought, wow, that's amazing, because he even went on record and said that from very earliest days of the program, they had accepted that vaccines could cause encephalopathy, which is brain swelling, and that one of the damages from brain swelling was autism. And I thought, oh my God, to the average American, that's A equals B equals C. Vaccines, brain swelling, autism. That makes perfect sense. And it was such a weird formulation that he said, which was, we've never paid out for vaccines causing autism, but we have paid for vaccines causing the damage that results in autism. And I thought, okay, well, it's close enough for me. The other thing that was interesting that I did was I interviewed Dr. Nora Engstrom from Stanford, and what she had done is she was one of the few academics who went and looked to see if the vaccine court was working the way it was supposed to be working, meaning that people who had injured kids got their money quickly and that there wasn't so much animosity in the system. And so the system which was set up, which was supposed to pay every family or say no to every family within 6 months. It's now taking 5 years to get a decision on average, and the animosity is greater than it's ever been. So it was kind of interesting to be talking to a Stanford law professor. And I said, okay, Dr. Engstrom, so do you think the vaccine court is working? No, I don't. Do you think the vaccine court provides a model for any other alternative dispute resolution formula? No, I don't. Do you think we should get rid of the vaccine court and just put vaccines back in the regular civil justice system? And she said, I don't feel qualified to make that conclusion. And I thought, oh my God, I'm talking to a Stanford law professor in torts, and you can't answer that question for me. It's kind of like I was thinking that if I talk to the chief special master of the vaccine court and a Stanford law professor, they would give me A to Z why this is a great system, but neither of them were willing to defend the system. And in fact, the former chief special master Gary Golkowitz had even gone so far as to tell me all of the suggested changes that he had made over the years that he couldn't get anybody in Congress to listen to him. So I thought, oh my God, so let's get this straight. The people who it was set up for don't think the system is working. The people who are administering the program don't think it's working. The academics on the outside who are looking at it are say it's not working. So nobody is telling me that this system is working. So let's get rid of it. Let's put vaccines back into the regular civil justice system where every other consumer product is, and let them stand or fall on their own.
Very good. Very good indeed. Well, folks, this has been a very interesting discussion so far. I think that we want to keep it down to below an hour.
This has been a very important and critically focused interview with Counsel Kent Hecken Lively, the world's #1 anti-vaxxer, which we all share with him. Before we end this very important broadcast, Counsel, can you give us a closing statement before the jury, which is the entire world?
Which counsel do you want?
Kent,
Counsel
you are
Hecken Lively.
Kent. You are the #1. The number one anti-vaxxer on the planet at the moment. You stand head and shoulders with Dr. Wakefield, with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., with Mahatma Gandhi, and others. So speak up.
So let me give my statement to the world about the 5-year childhood vaccine moratorium. What we are asking for is a return to reason, a return to the values of oversight and open, honest debate. What has happened in the past 15, 20 years with vaccines has been nothing less than a crime against humanity. Parents trust their doctors and their physicians. The physicians and doctors are trusting the CDC. That trust has been misplaced. We have talked until we are blue in the face to get the other side to actually discuss this with us. They have brought this situation about. They are the authors of the 5-year childhood vaccine moratorium. And so what we are doing is we are asking them to stop and end this slaughter. Do not allow vaccines to be injected into children for a period of 5 years and then to fix the structural problems which have allowed this tragedy to take place. All we are asking for is the principles of simple justice, openness, and honesty. As parents, we want to protect our children, but what the government and the CDC and the FDA has done is they have made every parent who goes and vaccinates their child a participant in child abuse. I say that if a parent follows the CDC recommended schedule, that is a clear-cut case of child abuse, but the parent is not completely at fault because they're being told this. The real criminals are the people in government and science and industry who are letting this take place and who are aiding it and abetting it and feeding the machine. We need to shut that machine down, take a look at what's inside, because we know it's going to be messy inside. We're going to fix this thing. We're going to heal our kids. We are going to look back at this as the moment when humanity took back its destiny and its health and saved itself as a species.
Give us that link again.
That link again is tinyurl.com/vaccine moratorium.
And that is Stop the Slaughter, Vaccine Moratorium Now, tinyurl.com/vaccine moratorium. Dr. Rima, bring us on out.
You've been listening to an interview that can change your life and that of countless children. We are talking about not asking for, but demanding and getting a 5-year moratorium on vaccines, which have been declared by our courts, including the Supreme Court, to be unavoidably unsafe, which are, like nuclear power, uninsurable risks, which are deadly, damaging, unnecessary, and highly, highly profitable if you consider the downstream effects. And oh, by the way, once again today, there was another documentation of the fact that the vaccines that WHO, Gavi, and Bill Gates are using in Africa, India, Central and South America are laced with infertility drugs. This was not speculation. This was documented once again. You don't know what's in a vaccine. What we know is bad enough. What we don't know is indescribably dangerous and can be unthinkably awful. So you don't want vaccines in your children's bodies, parenthesis, or in your own. But let's start with protecting the vulnerable. Let's start with a 5-year moratorium on childhood vaccinations, all of them, so that we can indeed stop the slaughter. tinyurl.com/vaccine moratorium. And when you take the 2 actions there, you will want to share that on every social media platform that you have access to. It's the numbers that are going to succeed here, the numbers of people, you, and friends, and your contacts.